According to Microsoft, Excel is used by over 750 million people worldwide. It is ranked 1 with the most features and over 400 functions. If you're aiming for roles like data analyst, financial analyst, or even business consultant, Excel is a critical tool you need to master. Excel interviews, however, aren't just about knowing formulas and functions. Rather, employers look for how well you can leverage Excel to solve real-world problems, whether it's building dynamic dashboards, performing advanced data analysis, or automating tasks with macros. Interviewers often test a mix of theoretical understanding and hands-on skills. The good news, you're in the right place. This resource is tailored to help you grasp the key concepts interviewers focus on. We've compiled frequently asked questions that thousands of professionals have encountered during their interviews. These questions range from foundational topics to advanced level challenges, ensuring you're prepared for anything. So grab your notebook and pen and let's get started. And do not forget to subscribe to the Intellipaat's YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to never miss any update from our end. So the very first question for our Excel interview questions is, what is the difference between an absolute cell reference and a relative cell reference? So as you can see in this particular table, an absolute cell reference remains fixed when a formula is copied to other cells, whereas a relative cell reference changes relative to the position where the formula is copied. So whenever we use an absolute cell reference, we will have to use the dollar symbol before the column letter or the row number. But in case of a relative cell reference, we do not need any dollar symbol. We will directly access the column as well as the row. So let's see how it is going to be implemented in Excel. So as you can see over here, I have my two columns, column A and column B. Now I want to add these two values. Now in case of absolute cell reference, if I were to add these two particular columns, my formula for sum would look something like this, where I would have my first number, that is A5, and I would be using dollar because I want this particular row and this particular column. So I'm going to fix both my row and my column, and I'm going to do that for my second number as well, which is 20. So I will be using the dollar symbol in both the cases, and as you can see, the sum is 100 plus 20, which is 120. So if I were to copy this particular formula for the rest of my rows over here, so as you can see, it is going to be 120 for all of these cells, for all of these numbers as well. But in case of a relative cell reference, let us look at it quickly. If I were to add the two columns, so this column and this column, so I am not fixing any row or column, rather I am just selecting the numbers. So you can see the sum is 120, but if I copy this particular formula for the rest of my rows, this is what I get. So 200 plus 10 is 210, 100 plus 50 is 150, and so on. So this is the major difference between absolute and relative cell reference. Alright, so moving on to our next question. What is the syntax of the VLOOKUP function and what are its primary components? So in this question, our major focus is the VLOOKUP function, and the rest of the question is just the follow-up or the basic areas that you need to keep in mind while answering the VLOOKUP function, right? So as you can see over here, we have the syntax for the VLOOKUP function, and our first parameter is the lookup value. Now this is the value that you want to search for in your entire data set, right? Then your next parameter is your table array. Now this is the range of cells containing the data to search. Now in your entire Excel sheet, what part of the data set do you want to give to the function where you want to search for your lookup value, right? Then you have your column index number. Now this is the column number from which to return the matching value. Alright, you need to provide a column number that this is the column that I'm looking my value to be returned from. Then you have your range lookup. This is the logical value that is true or false, indicating whether to perform an approximate or an exact match. So you can give a true over here for an approximate match, but if you want an exact match, you need to give a false value here. Alright, so let's look at the implementation in our Excel. So over here you can see we have ID and we have name. So we have a few ID numbers over here, and associated to each ID number we have some names of the colors, right? So one is for orange, two is for red, and so on. So now let's go ahead and perform our VLOOKUP function. So over here in this VLOOKUP function, our first parameter is the lookup value. So say I want to look for the value yellow. I need to pass the row number, which is 3. Then I'm going to pass my table array, which is the entire data set. I'm just going to select it, and then lastly I'm going to pass the column index number, which is 2 in our case, because we will be starting our column count from the left hand side. So this is a column 1 and this is going to be a column 2. Alright, so there we have found our value yellow. So this is basically how the VLOOKUP function works. Moving ahead with our third question, how would you apply basic conditional formatting to highlight cells containing values greater than 100 in a dataset? So these are the basic steps. We will go ahead and perform them in our Excel sheet. So say we are considering these two columns, and I want to highlight all my cells that are greater than 100. So once we highlight all the cells that we want to format, we will go ahead and click on the drop down for conditional formatting and go to highlight cell rules and then select greater than. Now I want to highlight all the cells that are greater than 100, and I can choose different colors over here, maybe yellow fill with dark yellow text, and there. So basically these are the two cells that are greater than 100 and they have been highlighted for us. Alright. So this is how you perform conditional formatting, and you can give different criterias and perform n number of operations using conditional formatting. Alright. So moving on with our fourth question, explain the purpose of wildcards in Excel. So we will be looking at the 3 wildcards that are present in Excel. The first one is the asterisk. So this basically represents any number of characters, 0 or more. So say you give an input PRO star or asterisk. Now this particular string is going to match with PRO, product, programming. Basically this is going to match with anything that contains the letters PRO in this particular order. Then we have the next wildcard, which is the question mark. So this basically represents exactly one character. Now this particular input would not match words like product or programming, right? It would only match the word PROD, or if we had a word say PROJ, right? So it is going to match with words that have PRO and another letter. Then lastly we have the tilde wildcard. This is an escape wildcard. So basically if you need to actually use star or question mark in your input, you can use the tilde. So here it is going to consider file star and not file and any other character after file, right? So it is basically going to match file star but not file 123, because we have used a tilde operation and it is going to consider star as an actual character. So let's go ahead and see the wildcards in our Excel sheet. Alright, so we have these 3 inputs over here. So we will perform wildcards with the function countIf. Okay, so now I need to give my range. So this is my range, and then my criteria is count if my input matches with PRO asterisk and quotes, enter. Okay, so PRO basically matches with all these 3 words, so that's why our count is 3. But what if instead of an asterisk we were to use a question mark? What would be our output? So in this case our output would be 1, because we would match only PROD and not product and programming, right? So if we were to use a tilde operator and then a star, so our count is 0 because we do not have any word containing a star in their characters, right? So this is how wildcards operate. Let's look at our fifth question. What is a pivot table? Now a pivot table is basically an interactive tool in Excel. It is used to summarize, analyze and present large data sets, right? So it is going to help you to organize data dynamically without you having to alterate your original table or original data set, right? So you can group, filter, calculate data such as sums, averages, counts and percentages. So basically you can perform all your aggregate functions using the pivot tables. So let's look at their implementation in our Excel. So we have this table where we have our date, region and sales. Alright. So now if we were to pivot this entire table in such a way that we would get the sum of all the north sales together and the south sales together. Alright, so we wouldn't have to really alter our table. Rather, we can do it in a more efficient way. So as we already discussed, the main advantage of using pivot tables is that we will not have to alter our original data set. Rather, we will just have to go to insert and select pivot table, and we are going to create a new worksheet, and we have already selected the range for our new table or our pivot table, and I'm simply going to select on OK. So as you can see, a new sheet is created for me automatically, and all I have to do is drag drop my columns in the way I want to pivot or in the way I want them to be, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all my sales as my values. I'm going to have my date as my column, and I'm going to have my region as my rows. Alright, so as you can see, I have my north sales over here in January as 900, south sales in January at 600, and in February 700. So I'm also getting my total over here automatically. So this is basically how you can create pivot tables in Excel. Then we have our sixth question. Write a formula using the if function to check if a number is greater than 75. If true, we have a pass condition. Otherwise, we have to return fail. Alright, so this is the basic syntax. When we use an if condition, we give a condition over here or a comparison. This is our cell value, and this is the number 75 that was mentioned in the question. So basically, if condition takes three arguments. The first one is the condition. If this condition is true, we're going to return our second argument. And if this condition is false, we're going to return our third argument, which is fail. So let's go ahead and implement it in Excel. Alright, so we have our data set over here where we have students' names, their marks, their courses. What we are basically interested here is in the marks, right? So let's go ahead and write our if condition. So if this particular cell is greater than 75, the student is going to be considered as pass. Otherwise, it is going to be a fail. Right, so there, it's pass. Now if I were to go ahead and copy this for the rest of my rows, I could do it like this, right? So as you can see, this is 71.82 and it's a fail. So that means our logic is correct and our syntax is correct and our if condition is working perfectly, right? So this is how you can implement the if condition. We can call this, say, result. Right. So moving on with our seventh question. What are macros in Excel and how can they be used to automate repetitive tasks? So a macro is basically a sequence of recorded actions or a script which can also be written in VBA or Visual Basic for applications. Now this is something related to code. So if you are someone who is interested in coding, you can go ahead and explore VBA, which is really amazing for a lot of tasks. But if you are someone who is not very familiar with coding, we are going to implement macros without any codes and it is going to be super easy. So macro basically helps to automate the repetitive tasks, right? It is going to allow the users to execute multiple steps with a single click and definitely is going to save time, right? We can also create shortcuts using macros. Let's see how. Alright, so say I have multiple sheets like this where I have my students' marks of different sections. Now I'm given a task where I need to highlight all the students who have failed their test. So instead of going to every sheet and executing the same steps, what I can do is I will go to the view section in Excel, go to macros and click on record macro. I'm going to name it result and I will give the shortcut Ctrl+R. And I'm going to store it in this workbook and I will click on OK. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this particular column and I'm going to apply conditional formatting. I'm going to highlight all the cells which are less than 75 so that I easily know whenever I open my worksheet that these are the students who have failed the test, right? So now this action has been recorded and now I need to go to my macros and stop the recording. Now all we have to do is run the macros. Now since this is already implemented, let me go ahead and clear the rules. So as you can see, my rules have been cleared. Now if I press Control plus R, my macros has automatically executed the task for me and applied the conditional formatting. So this is basically how macros works, and it is not just limited to this particular task. You can go ahead and implement several tasks using macros, and the application is endless. You can also go ahead and try out the VBA or the Visual Basic for applications. So knowing macros is basically an advantage in an interview. But if you are someone, as we discussed, who is not very familiar with coding, you do not need to go deep into the VBA aspects of macros. Rather, you can use macros and implement it using the recording option, right? So moving on with our eighth question, what is the limitation of VLOOKUP when handling large data sets or multiple criteria, and what advanced alternatives can overcome these limitations? So let's look at the limitations of VLOOKUP for large data sets. This is also how you'll be answering these questions in an interview. So firstly, you can mention performance issues like it is really slow with large data sets. Now, why is that? It is mainly because VLOOKUP searches linearly throughout the data until it finds a match. So let's look at the limitations of VLOOKUP for large data sets. So firstly, you can mention the performance issues like VLOOKUP is really slow with large data sets. Now, why is that? It is mainly because VLOOKUP works in a linear manner. That is, it will linearly go throughout the data until it finds a match. Then we have the volatile calculations. Now, this basically means that if many VLOOKUP formulas are used, recalculating them can significantly impact the performance. So, this is basically what volatile calculation means. Then there is fixed column index. So VLOOKUP requires a fixed column index to retrieve the result. So if the column structure is changed, that is the columns are inserted or deleted, basically any changes made in the dataset is going to affect the formula. It could break the procedure and even produce incorrect results. Then the next limitation is one-way search. So VLOOKUP only searches to the right of the column and it cannot look for values to the left of the lookup column. Then our fourth limitation is case insensitivity. Now VLOOKUP is not case sensitive. So if the data requires differentiation between uppercase and lowercase text, VLOOKUP will not meet that criteria. Then we also have single criterion matching. So VLOOKUP works with one lookup value at a time, right? It cannot handle complex queries with multiple criteria. So that is a major drawback with VLOOKUP. Then lastly, we have the error handling. So in this case, what happens is if no match is found, VLOOKUP is going to throw an error. Then you need additional functions like if error to handle the particular error. Then you need additional functions like if error, which are just going to complicate the formula and make your Excel sheet really messy. So what are the alternatives for VLOOKUP? So some of the advanced alternatives are index match combination. So the index match combination is something we'll be looking at in our Excel sheet as well. But let's understand what's index and what is match over here. So index is going to return the value of a cell in a table based on the column and row number. Okay, so we need to pass the column, we need to pass the row number, and it is just going to return the value of the cell. Then we have match. This is going to return the position of a cell in a row or a column. So basically we're going to use a combination of index and match as an alternative for VLOOKUP. Let's see how. Alright, so we'll be using this table itself. So first let's look at index. So the first thing it needs is the array. Alright, so my array is basically the entire table, right? Then I'm going to have my row number. So let's say I want to access this particular student. So basically my row number is going to be 2 and then my column number is also going to be 2. So let's see. Okay, so there I have my value as Tanya Gautam. Now let's see if I want to use the match function. So in this case, my lookup value is going to be this particular student again. And my lookup array is going to be from here to here. And then my match type is going to be 0, which is the exact match. Okay, so basically in the lookup array, we need to pass only our column. Alright, so there. So match has basically returned the number of row where this particular cell is located. Right. Now, if we were to use the combination of these two, what would happen is basically instead of using the row and column number directly, what we would do is we would use the match function over here itself, right? And we would basically copy whatever we have passed over here. Okay, so let me just type it. So it would be my match, and my lookup value would be B2. My lookup array would be this particular column. My match type would be 0. Okay, this is my row number over here, 2. And then I need my column number as 2 again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and paste it here. There. So I've used a combination of index and match to return the same value. But the only difference was, instead of giving the row number and the column number directly, what I did was I used the match function, and whatever row number and column number the match function returned was passed as arguments for the index function. So you can use a combination of index function and match function instead of VLOOKUP. And the other alternatives are the XLOOKUP, which is available in Excel 365 and 2021. So this is the basic syntax where you pass the lookup value, the lookup array, the return array. You give a condition if not found. And it also has a built-in error handling, which is handled by the if not found argument. Right? Then you have Power Query, which is again supported in Excel 365 and versions higher than 2021. And then you have an alternative of SQL in Excel or Google Sheets. So in order to pass an SQL query in Excel, this is the kind of syntax that you will have to follow, where you give your equal to query, you select the range and then give the query that you want to be executed. Then we have our ninth question: create a nested if function to determine grades based on the marks. So if marks are greater than or equal to 90, the grade is A. If marks are between 75 to 89, it is grade B. And if marks are between 70 to 75, it is grade C. Alright, so let's go ahead and implement this in our Excel sheet. Let's call this column as grades. Alright, so my condition is if, and basically if this is greater than 90, greater than or equal to 90, my grade is going to be A. Okay, if my marks are greater than 75, my grade is going to be B. If my marks are greater than 70, my grade is going to be C. So here my grade is B. So my logic is correct, and you can go ahead and copy paste the formula, and there you have your grades for all the students. So this is how you can implement the nested if function to implement multiple conditions in one particular index, right? So let's look at the last question for this particular series. So the question is, describe the significance of inferential statistics in data analysis and provide an example of how Excel can assist in performing inferential statistical tests. So let's look at the significance of inferential statistics. The first one is to make predictions. Alright, so whenever we come across the terms like data analysis and inferential statistics, the first thought is to make predictions, right? It could be about a population based on a particular sample. Then comes hypothesis testing. Basically, they help test the hypothesis to determine relationships, differences, or effects, right? Then comes generalization. So by analyzing a representative sample, you can generalize the findings to the larger population. Then comes decision making. So the statistical analysis or the inferential stats basically provide a foundation for making data-driven decisions in fields such as business, healthcare, and even education. So one of the examples of inferential stats is t-test, which can be performed in Excel. So before we go ahead and see how a t-test is performed in Excel, let's understand the t-test. So it is used to compare the means of two groups to determine if the difference is statistically significant, right? So consider a scenario where you want to determine whether there's a significant difference in test scores between two groups of students, right? So let's go ahead and implement the t-test. So I have a data set where I have two scores basically of two groups. So this is what my group A scored and this is what my group B scored. So in order to perform t-test in your Excel sheet, the first thing you need to do is go to your file, go to your get add-ins option and search for toolpack. So the first add-in you see after typing toolpack, that is the analysis toolpack. Once you add this to your Excel. In your home section, you will be able to see the option show toolpack. Now, once you click on it, you will be able to see all the different tests and all the different operations that you can perform on your dataset, right? So I want to perform a t-test, that is to sample for means, and my variable 1 range is going to be this column. My variable 2 range is going to be this column. My hypothesized mean difference is 0. My alpha is going to be 0.05, and my output range is going to be this column. So once I click on OK, all I have to do is wait. Okay, so instead of selecting the entire column, all I'm going to do is select the data manually, and similarly I'm going to do that for this particular column itself, and then I'm going to give it 0, and my output range is going to be all these cells. Click on OK, and as you can see, I got the data for my t-test, and these are the values. So the mean for this particular group is 270, and the mean for the new group is 267. The variance is 77 and 98. And basically you get all the different parameters associated with t-test in your Excel sheet with a few simple steps. So it's pretty cool, right? So this is all for this video. I hope you guys got a hang of Excel and you will be able to implement all the basic functions that we discussed. If you guys like the video, do hit the like button and stay tuned for more such videos.